The Labour Party, after 14 years of political irrelevance and a string of election defeats, is on course for one of the biggest landslides of modern times. But can it hold? Could Keir Starmer truly be the most powerful Prime Minister in living memory? I'm Toby Lepati-Mesme, and joining me for this week of Political Paradigms to answer that question is Theo Bird. Theo, it's been a while. Welcome back.
I'm normally on every week. You make me sound like a special guest.
Yeah, special correspondent. No, he is here every week. It's just every
Just in
weekend.
case you guys didn't notice.
There's a reason we haven't been able to record it. But we're here now, and apparently you're suffering from the sand, I hear.
There's where I live, there's an influx of sand. Not quite a sandstorm, but a lot of sand, and it's giving me respiratory problems. But I can talk and I can spew my usual nonsense, so I'm fit to do the podcast.
Well, I'm struggling with the pollen as well, which is never great. But let's get on to the politics.
Oh, yeah. Hay fever, of course.
Our last podcast was about the budget. I mean, since then, it's kind of been business as usual in many ways. The polling hasn't moved. Labour is still 20 points ahead. We've had a number of those MRP polls. You know I love those MRP polls, Theo. They're one of my favourite things. And there have been a number of them recently. The YouGov one is the one I'm going to look at. We had one that had the Tories below 100 seats. And that was based on polling right now. So that is where we are right now. Assuming that some, Tory voters return to the fold, Labour are on course for nearly as big a landslide as Tony Blair in 1997. Even when you factor in things like reform voters going back, a swing towards the Conservatives, all these kind of things, Labour still have a moderate majority. So even in the absolute best case scenario where everything goes their way, which is not happening at the moment, they still lose. As of right now, they're on course to lose more than 200 seats. And as I say, the other MRP model in the last week had the Conservatives down to 98 seats. The odds on the betting markets of the Conservative Party falling to something like 50 seats are about 10%. I think it's gone up to 20% recently. It's increasing. Theo, what would a Labour, and Katie Balls was writing about this in The Spectator, there wouldn't be physically enough room in Parliament, so the government benches would have to extend to the opposition side. What would a Labour supermajority actually mean for British politics?
I can tell you, but first, I don't quite understand that. How surely the number of MPs in Parliament wouldn't change, right? Or that there would be so many Labour MPs they'd have to sit on the other side. Is that what they mean?
Basically, yes. The government benches would not fit the number of MPs Labour is currently set to win.
Now that would be funny. Imagine them sitting on the floor on beanbags or something.
And there's also been reporting that Conservative figures are concerned that they'll be covered as a fringe party, and the media will just cover different Labour factions as the opposition. That's how
they
dominant
can get
Labour
salty
would be.
about that, but they're partly responsible for that predicament, if you can call it that.
Yeah,
that they may end up in. I think what would define the early years of a new Labour government is finding their feet and bureaucratic frustration over the transition of government, I'd say.
You think that's going to be a big issue? You think that's going to be a big issue?
Yes, I don't think it would be a massively smooth transition. I mean, people can comment on how the current government is performing and what they think they do better, but then actually getting into government, I think there's a lot more actual detail involved. I'm not saying Labour are all idealistic and childlike, but I think they're probably aware that it wouldn't be super smooth. I mean, they've been out of office for so long.
Yeah.
How many actual Labour shadow frontbenchers have experience governing and working with the civil service and things like that?
Well, in the case of Keir Starmer, of course, none. That's the interesting thing, right?
Yeah. I think even Jeremy Corbyn had some veterans of the Blair years in his transition team, didn't he?
He did have. Yes, there were a few people who sort of have continually knocked about. I guess Starmer has the same thing. He has some people that were junior during the New Labour years. He has no one that was senior because they're all, frankly, retired at this stage. That's how long they've been out of power for.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, that granted, there are a lot of people, I think, in the country, perhaps a majority would argue that Labour shadow ministers with no governing experience will still govern better than these Tory ministers, some of whom have upwards of 10 years of experience.
Yeah,
So that's not to say less experience equals worse results for the country, especially if you're more ideologically aligned.
I mean, if we had like a national referendum, like, do you want the country governed by, I don't know, Angela Rayner, Lisa Nandy, or Michael Gove or Rishi Sunak? Yeah, it would probably go against them simply by virtue of the fact they're Conservatives and the Conservative brand is shot to pieces. But yeah, the point is very valid. Labour are talking a lot about this. Quoted in, again, Katie Ball's piece in The Spectator, Starmer wants the Labour Parliamentary Party to be the parliamentary equivalent of a Ferrari, meaning he wants all these people trained up and ready for power. He doesn't want loads of people, loads of randos, basically, winning seats they didn't expect to win, which you could say the Conservatives had a bit of a problem with, the number of sort of red wall MPs that have had loads of scandals because they weren't thoroughly vetted, because no one thought the Tories would win in sort of Cumbria and places like this. A Labour supermajority, again, it's not the most likely outcome. I think we're both on record as saying we think it'll be a big Labour win, but not something sort of off the charts. It'll just be huge, or big. Theo, in the event this were actually to come to pass, let's say all these positive assumptions like reform voters, some of them going back, and some Tory voters who are apathetic actually turning out because they're worried about Labour and all the rest of it. Let's say all these things don't happen. Let's throw in there's a leadership challenge to Rishi Sunak, weakening him further. Nigel Farage splits the right-wing vote. All things completely within the realm of possibility. We end up with that result. You know, the Conservative Party on 50 seats, 60 seats, 70 seats, 80 seats. Complete collapse. Labour dominant, pushing 500 seats. Maybe even the Liberal Democrats are the official opposition. What does that worry you constitutionally? There wouldn't be, I mean, one thing I was reading is like, there's a lot of concerns that in terms of opposition, what Tory MPs were left would not be qualified to properly scrutinise the government. They wouldn't be able to put together a sufficient shadow cabinet. It would kind of be a pick and mix. They'd essentially, the opposition would be completely irrelevant to lawmaking. Does that concern you from a constitutional perspective?
It does. That being said, I would argue that structurally, scrutiny of the government is suboptimal in quality, just inherently, with the way the system is set up. I think as long as you have first past the post, as long as you have parliamentary government, where government is drawn from, operating through, accountable to parliament, I don't think that system is fit for purpose if your goal is proper scrutiny of the government and proper representation of the voters in a pluralistic democracy. I mean, this would merely exacerbate what I think is an underlying problem. This 14 years of Tory rule, despite the fact they've never had a really, stupendous majority, has still been characterised by those problems.
We do essentially elect 5-year mini dictatorships with first past the post, don't we? Because they can essentially do what they want within reason.
We do. And despite what I believe to be record anti-first past the post, pro-proportional representation sentiment, I think it is a self-preserving system.
Yeah.
It's in both major parties' interest to reserve first past the post, despite what I would call some important ideological differences between them.
This is the thing, right? A Labour government that gets like 60-70% of Parliament with 40% of the vote isn't then going to get rid of the electoral system that gave them that.
Exactly. Which is why I think even seeing major figures on the left recently, such as Owen Jones, defecting to the Green Party, not defecting to the Green Party, but saying he's going to vote Green.
Yeah.
It doesn't actually seem that dramatic for Labour because first past the post just preserves these parties. Massive winners bonus from a margin as small as 1% in any constituency goes to that seat. And some parties that can get, substantial shares of the vote rewarded with nothing, such as, Green Party, UKIP, you name it.
There's an interesting piece in the Times about this, basically saying there is a drift in safe Labour seats of Labour voters towards the Liberal Democrats or the Greens, but it's not losing them any seats because they have inbuilt massive majorities in those seats, while meanwhile they are actually doing better in swing seats. So it's more vote efficiency, as it were. Labour are losing support in areas they can afford to lose support, and they're gaining support in areas where they need support. In other words, Labour can get more bang for its buck. 40% of the vote in 2017 for Labour equated, they came a pretty distant second in a hung parliament. In 2024, 40% of the vote for Labour probably equates a large majority. This is, as you say, it's first past the post is working for them.
Yes. I mean, a lot does come down to the nature of the period of politics we're in and how spread out the votes are.
Yeah.
But generally, both parties benefit more than any. I mean, as you say, now Labour stand to really benefit from first past the post. And what I'd say they always have, in 2015, for example, they wouldn't as much, whereas Conservatives on 37% of the vote or something like that get a 12-seat majority, which is not crazy, but it's still a majority. It still allows them to make legislative changes, broadly speaking.
I mean, if you were a Labour partisan in the last few elections, you'd want proportional representation, because even in 2019, you could sketch together probably a coalition of Labour, Lib Dems, Greens, and you'd have a majority in Parliament. If you're a Tory, this is the year you want proportional representation, and Labour doesn't, right? Because Labour would be a minority in Parliament. They'd probably still form a government, but the Conservatives wouldn't be as far behind as they're going to be. It's interesting. Basically, if you're a loser, you want proportional representation in terms of your own self-interest.
Yes, I mean, I think long term, neither of the main parties know proportional representation is in their interests.
Yeah.
On the Labour side, parties like the Greens, more left-wing parties, more liberal parties, would definitely encroach on them with proportional representation. And on the Tory side, I think even more dramatic reform and maybe even further right parties such as the BNP, who I think are still around. I wouldn't put it past the Tories to make a knee-jerk reaction, which is against their long-term interest, to try and advocate for proportional representation now. But long-term, it's definitely not what would be, good for them after this inevitable defeat.
Very much so. So looking at Labour, again, they're on course for a big win, but they are not without their problems. Angela Rayner, deputy leader of the Labour Party, someone I would say politically has been an asset for Keir Starmer, generally speaking. It comes across well in focus groups, connects quite well with voters. Bit of a wild cannon, but that's what you get from sort of effective popular politicians. She has come under fire. I think they're calling this Housegate or Taxgate. I don't know, but basically
another gate, and anything with a politician becomes gate now.
When you're explaining something, it's probably not going to cut through to the public. I think this may be one of those stories, but basically, she lived in a house, and it's like, did she live in this house or not? And did she not pay tax on a house when she should have done? We're dealing with very small sums of money. It's not a deliberate tax evasion scheme. At best, it looks like an oversight. At worst, it's sort of nothing blown up. But the sort of right-wing media have gone big on this. Conservatives have gone big on this. Labour have been asked some awkward questions. It's never great when you're being asked questions about sort of your deputy leader's propriety. Theo, do you think stuff like this has any impact? Is this, I mean, from my point of view at the moment, this is noise. A bit like how Boris Johnson's wallpaper arrangements were sort of noise. They didn't matter. A bit like how sort of Rishi Sunak using a helicopter. All these little things that partisans get very het up about, they're not going to move the needle. The only time something big moves the needle is when it's like the Prime Minister party during lockdown. Like something like that is huge and visceral. Do you think the Conservatives are on to something? Will this help them in some way by hammering these kind of issues? What's your assessment of this?
I'd say sleaze is definitely not a good look for the Labour Party.
Yeah.
Given that they're banking on a Tory collapse because of their reputation, which was destroyed by sleaze. But I'd say as long as the volume of Labour sleaze is lower than the Tory sleaze volume, which it most certainly is, then I think we should be all, not we, they should be all right. I think it's another one of those, will this affect it? And within a week, the polling shows absolutely no direct change, if you know what I mean.
This will be this time the Labour lead will collapse, bro. I promise. This time, one more scandal, bro. One more.
And I mean, look, I wouldn't.
The Rishi comeback is just around the corner, bro. I swear.
Yeah, I mean, I think any voter thinking Tory sleaze versus Labour sleaze. Yeah. I mean, I think most voters would just object merely to the fact that Rishi Sunak's a nigh-on billionaire. Just inherently, I think that says
there has been a lot of that in focus. People did think that wouldn't happen, but there has been a lot of anti-Rishi being rich in focus groups, hasn't there? There's been a lot of that sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can get away with it if you have the charisma. When you're kind of awkward, I'll say awkward and creepy, the way he is,
it's very harsh.
You just come off as really condescending. I mean, I know you're probably not going to like this, but I'd say Vivek Ramaswamy, another billionaire politician, actually played this very well in the US election. He came off as much more like man of the people, despite the fact that his net worth is like 10,000 times the average person. But he didn't seem like he didn't drip loathing in the way I'd say Sunak does.
Yet Sunak quoted in the Times this week as, in a moment of desperation, saying to his aides, "Why don't people agree with me? I'm right."
Yeah, he's got some political acumen on him.
It reminds me of Keir Starmer is quoted as saying, you know, that those terrible local elections for Labour in 2021.
Yeah.
Keir Starmer is quoted as walking around in Labour offices going, "Why does everyone hate us? Why does everyone hate us?"
These people are human. No.
It's kind of relatable, isn't it? Both of them. It's kind of. I feel like I'd be like that if I was like 20 points down. I'd be like, "Why does everyone hate me?"
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah. So there's that going on. Other Labour stories to keep an eye on. They want to refer Keir Starmer to the Privileges Committee over that whole faff with the Speaker. Again, I don't think there'll be a smoking gun, and they're probably fine. But it does feel to me like the Conservatives and the Conservative-aligned media are really... It's beginning, right? The push to sort of find stuff that can stick to Labour, which was always going to happen.
Yes,
it's ramping up.
Yes, I'm not sure if it'll be... Well, honestly, I was going to say I'm not sure if it's going to be on a Corbyn magnitude.
Yeah.
Scale. But then again, I suppose if you think of the actual consequences for the media, if they're just trying to save their own skin, who knows how aggressive the campaign will be.
I think the thing that...
I mean, that being said, this Labour government, I think, still appears quite pro-business. So I'd maybe take that with a pinch of salt.
I think the thing with Corbyn that tipped it was... Obviously, you had the right-wing media and right-wing partisans, but you also had elements of more bipartisan media taking the same line, and you also had members of the Labour Party taking the same line. I think that's when it's very damning. Like, if all media outlets were doing blanket Angela Rayner coverage and, like, half of the Labour Party were going on TV saying this is serious, it would be much more damaging. Like, that's when it's... When your own party starts worrying about the scandal and turns on you, that's when it gets... Would you agree that's when it gets more damaging? Because voters look and go, oh, this isn't just party political? I think that's what damaged Corbyn. It was like, wow, Labour people are saying this as well.
Yeah, I'd say division probably doesn't help, and also, yeah, you get the media attacks and people in his party not defending him. That's not a good look. But again, like I said, if we're weighing up sleeves between the parties, Tories definitely win, and if we're weighing up division between the parties, again, Tories definitely win. I'm not sure if that's a... I think I'm onto something with this theory that you can just simply look at two issues that plague parties, whichever one suffers more in the media with that issue being present, or not even in the media. They're more like they're likely to be worse off.
I agree
because of it.
Yeah,
like Labour can be sleazy as long as the Tories are sleazier. I think it is fine. I'm not saying sleaze is fine, but you get my point.
I get your point. Like, at worst, it becomes a draw. Even if Labour had a huge scandal, it becomes a draw. And they're not having a huge scandal right now. But it's like, because the Tories are so tainted, they'll never win on this issue. Like, think how low Labour would have to go to be viewed as worse. It's very unlikely.
Yes, I don't think it's possible.
No, it probably isn't. And if it is, it's probably for the best that Labour don't get elected. My God, can you imagine? What would it be? It'd have to be like I don't know, Keir Starmer's running like a crime ring or something. I don't know.
Something like that. Some kind of Pizzagate thing.
Unlikely from a former director of public prosecutions, I have to say.
No, I mean, unless some of the stories from his time as public prosecutions director surface, then he might be cooked.
They're going to go with that, the Tories. I mean, they tried to do the whole conspiracy theories about Jimmy Savile, all that. They seem to have backed off on that. I bet you, before the election cycle's over, there'll be some dodgy headline about, like, Keir Starmer lets rapists out of prison or something like that. That'll be the attack line, won't it? I suspect.
I mean, I think, yes, but I'd say it wouldn't be the first time. I mean, I think it was, a year ago that Labour put out that absurd tweet saying, do you think, child molesters should go to prison? Rishi Sunak doesn't.
I remember I sent you that, and you were like, that's not real. And it was.
And then but the crazy thing was I went to the page, it was still up. There was just a bunch of outraged responses from people on all sides.
Yeah.
And then they put up a series of similar ones about guns and about...
Do you want sewage?
Knife crime.
Do you like knives on the street? Rishi Sunak does, or something like that, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, they didn't follow through with that. But look at how that impacted their polling. Not much.
No. If anything, they went up. They were speaking to the silent majority, Theo.
Labour's silent majority, yeah.
Labour's Nixon strategy. Anyway, it would be funny if Keir Starmer turned out to be a modern-day Richard Nixon, wouldn't it? The ultimate Machiavellian politician, master of strategy.
What would Starmer's gate be?
I don't know.
To be fair, I wouldn't put it past Starmer to send agents into Tory headquarters to collect information.
He doesn't need to, though. They all leak it. They all leak their own WhatsApp groups.
They do, don't they? They really do.
They don't need it. There doesn't need to be any espionage.
Who pulls out their phone and an illegal lockdown party and records it?
No, but that's it. Like they've got like the crimes on tape. It's like I think that's the thing about nowadays. If Labour HQ were committing like crimes, someone would have Snapchatted it by mistake by now, and it'd have come out. Do you know what I mean? It's like,
yeah. I think honestly, this is a bit of a historical point, but Watergate started a kind of it made whistleblowing a lot more accepted, and I think very few people now would fear being a whistleblower. So you just can't really keep things under wraps anymore.
But there are enough people in Labour headquarters and enough people in Tory headquarters that don't like Sunak or Starmer that would be willing to leak something damaging to them if it was that bad, right? Put it that way. Yeah. Someone in Labour headquarters hates Keir Starmer and would happily leak incriminating information.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that perhaps has something to do with the disillusionment with the political process, the political system. Yeah. Maybe even the people working in it don't really feel that they're working for much. I
mean, it's lots of negative briefing, more from the Tories, actually. Labour have got their act together. But every week it's like, a source close to Sunak says he's cooked and we all hate him. It's like, oh, great. He's surrounded by some really positive-minded people. Imagine you were getting briefings, like a briefing from the political paradigm's headquarters. Theo is a dickhead and we hate him. It's like, Jesus, people around you must...
All right, then.
Yeah, I've been reading the paper, which one of you guys did this? Was it you, Sonny? All right, final story of the week. I want to take a little look. We are now a month out from the May local elections. Obviously, lots of councils are up. Tories may lose up to half their councillors. TBC. Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, probably cruising to re-election, right, Theo? Probably. Most likely.
I don't even know who the Tory candidate is, so I'd say so, yeah.
Susan Hall, she's on record as being a Trump supporter.
Oh, okay.
Which is interesting.
Sure, she'll blitz it then.
She'll.
What happened to Sean Bailey? He seemed like quite a promising candidate. Wasn't he?
He was at a lockdown party.
Oh, great. Oh, Sean.
Oh, Sean. He actually did better than expected in 2022. I hope I've not just labelled Sean Bailey. I'm sure this is true. I've got to double check. You were a Sean.
No, I think you're right. Actually,
was it Sean Bailey? Yes, it was Sean Bailey. So it's confusing because the Green candidate was Sean Berry.
I bet they did that on purpose. Right, have we got anyone with a similar sounding name? Oh, how about Sean over there?
Oh yeah, there was a lockdown party. There's a picture of him there. They're all partying. Okay, right. fine. Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
I think in terms of London, I don't think anyone except Boris Johnson could win it for the Tories.
No, and obviously
Or not, or should I say Boris Johnson in
yeah,
2008?
not now. Yeah.
No.
I mean, look, Khan is unpopular and Labour is dominant in London. So you'd need, I think, a non-partisan seeming Tory that is completely able to distinguish themselves. Or maybe like a centre-right independent candidate that the Tories tacitly support. Something like that. And then you could take him out.
I mean, do you get the feeling that at least the main parties, if not all parties, really struggle to just put up compelling candidates like that nowadays? I mean,
Yeah.
Boris Johnson and Blair, in a way, is similar in that they really kind of captivated people, but I don't feel like we've had anyone like that in a long time. And I'm saying Boris Johnson in 2019, very different from Johnson when he first emerged in 2008. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, we don't have big dominant personalities. I agree with that. Andy Burnham, you could say, a popular, distinct brand. The two mayoral campaigns that look more make or break for Sunak are let me get this right. So we've got Ben Houchen seeking re-election, Mayor of Tees Valley. You've got Andy Street, Mayor of the West Midlands. They are both kind of red. I mean, it really simplifies it to say red wall, but it's Brexity, northern-ish areas where these two guys romped home in 2021. They got voters across the political spectrum to vote for them. And it is now a case of two popular mayors versus the fact that the Conservative label is by their name. And what I've been hearing is, if both these guys go down, that is huge for Labour symbolically, because it's like even your best, most talented, most popular figures will still take them out. And it's also, for Sunak, oh my God. And it might precipitate a confidence vote. So, do you have any thoughts on this, Theo? What do you think will win out? Do you think like a popular local mayor, or do you think just by being Conservative, these guys are going to get sort of nuked?
I think you are right about it kind of just being a Labour stronghold, despite Khan's unpopularity.
I'm more talking about these two, the West Midlands and the Teesside Valley.
Okay,
mayor.
Yeah.
These guys who are popular Tory mayors, but obviously a really bad year to be a Tory.
I'd say anyone associated with the Tory brand is going to suffer because of that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how much it differs in terms of mayoral elections, but I wouldn't say too much. Which is the same point I was making with Sadiq Khan.
Yeah. It will be huge, actually. If these two guys win, that kind of means like voters are distinguishing and they'll vote for popular mayors despite like how they'd vote for Westminster. Sort of, it should have shown sophistication in the electorate, I guess. The one I'm keeping an eye on is North Yorkshire, because we are quite Tory, North Yorkshire.
Yes.
And it's a new mayoral area. So we're electing a mayor for the first... I'll be voting for the first time in this contest, Theo.
In the mayoral election.
Yeah. And it's kind of like, if Labour win the North Yorkshire mayoral contest, that's quite bad for the Conservatives. That's like Richmond, Harrogate, Skipton, all these places. Be interesting to see. Is there anything you're keeping an eye on in the local elections?
I'd say it's more the broad trend is what really matters.
Yeah.
I'm trying to kind of glean anything that goes against my preconceived notions of how the upcoming election is going to go, which is, I'd say, unlikely anything is going to change that.
Yeah. This is kind of just the prequel for the general election in many ways, I would say.
Look, they could have done it already. They could have announced it. We could have been in the lead up to it, but here we are speculating on North Yorkshire mayoral elections.
Now, as we've talked about before, it could be a moment of maximum peril for Rishi Sunak after the local elections. There's the prospect of resignation, leadership challenge, whether he'll push forward the election or name the date of the election, or any number of other things to shore up his position. I thought next week on the podcast we could do a deep dive Wargaming May the 3rd. The day after the local elections, you're Rishi Sunak, you're holed up in Downing Street, the worst has happened, you've lost everything everywhere. What do you do on Friday the 3rd of May? And I hope you'll join me and Theo next week for that. Theo, thank you for joining me.
I look forward to speculating with you.
Will you be getting in your Rishi Sunak mindset for next week?
I'll try as hard as I can.
Me too.
How does one amass £1 billion in a week?
Marry someone rich.
Oh yeah, that's what he did, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then make favourable non-dom laws for your wife.
And on that note, dear listener, thank you for joining us.